For centuries, the tale of Perseus and Medusa has completely captivated audiences. But as we'll explore in this explainer, these narratives are far more than just fantastical old stories. To the ancient Greeks, these myths functioned as highly sophisticated instruments of cultural understanding. They were intricate mechanisms, specifically designed to organize the vast, often overwhelming complexities of human fear, the pursuit of power, and the depths of mortal desire. They translated these massive, profound forces into a framework that an entire society could collectively grasp and, more importantly, pass down.
Now, consider this. Human existence in the ancient world was, quite frankly, inherently unpredictable and deeply chaotic. You had terrifying forces of nature, sudden mortal danger, and staggering psychological trials constantly clashing in the lives of early civilizations. So these ancient narratives were born out of a profound realization regarding the human condition. A myth takes that sprawling, unmanageable mess of raw human experience and actually gives it a memorable, recognizable shape.
So what exactly is a myth in this context? Well, you can think of it as a cultural meaning machine. It takes highly abstract human experiences like the desperate instinct for survival or the paralyzing grip of existential terror and arranges them into a structured, coherent form. It wasn't meant to be a literal historical record, right? Instead, it operated as a meticulously crafted system of shared symbols. This ensured that vital existential truths were preserved safely within the collective memory of the civilization. This brings us to a really fascinating dilemma, one that sits at the very center of the Perseus narrative's ancient architecture. What happens when the thing you absolutely must confront is also the thing you cannot face directly? This intricate paradox establishes the central tension of the entire myth. It drives every subsequent action, forcing our hero to navigate a landscape where standard, straightforward approaches to combat and survival are entirely obsolete.
And that brings us to Medusa. Now, within this symbolic framework, Medusa is not simply some monster of legend lurking in the darkness. No, she is the physical manifestation of a very specific lethal danger. She embodies a terror that actively punishes direct contact. To behold her is to be instantly destroyed by the very act of observation, representing an inescapable psychological threshold where human capacity simply ceases to function.
Let's break down the exact nature of this threat. As the legend goes, Medusa possessed the horrifying power to turn living things instantly to stone. And in the rich language of antiquity, stone represents life stopped completely cold. It doesn't move, it doesn't breathe, and it doesn't yield. It perfectly captures that rigid, unmoving nature of overwhelming terror, a force so absolute that it completely freezes human action, eradicates thought, and reduces vibrant life to a state of permanent heavy inertia.
There's a brilliant way to think about this imagery. Medusa is what fear looks like when it gets a body. By turning an abstract psychological truth into a physical, recognizable entity, the myth allowed the culture to actually visualize and process the very real, paralyzing forces that threaten their ancient world. It gave a distinct, terrifying face to that nameless dread that haunts the very edges of human endurance.
Now contrast Perseus with your standard mythological warrior. You know the type. They usually triumph through sheer physical brute force and loud, unyielding confidence. But Perseus represents an entirely different archetype. Facing a threat that destroys simply upon sight, his success relies entirely on controlled bravery, acute intelligence, and calculated restraint. The myth dictates that raw power is totally useless against true paralysis. Survival here demands a strategy of profound mediation.
It's literally like a giant puzzle where every single detail performs a specific symbolic job beneath the surface. The dangerous monster represents a form of overwhelming fear, while the hero's quest embodies agonizing human effort under immense pressure. The divine help illustrates the mortal need for support beyond ordinary strength. And the requirement of indirect sight? That signifies wisdom, critical distance, and caution. Ultimately, carrying the monster's severed head signifies turning mere survival into lasting, potent meaning.
Because of this overwhelming, absolute threat, Perseus simply could not rely on an open battle. I mean, stepping onto the battlefield with a drawn sword and staring directly at the enemy would guarantee instant petrification. His approach required absolute mediation. The danger had to be filtered. He had to step away from the fatal instinct of direct confrontation and move toward an intricate, calculated execution of strategy.
To pull off this impossible task, the hero was armed with highly specialized instruments bestowed by the gods. He received the highly polished mirrored shield, an unbreakable curved blade designed for a single decisive strike, winged sandals to navigate the treacherous terrain without touching the earth, and vital divine guidance to illuminate his path. Ancient heroism, in this context, was all about precisely matching the correct, methodical tools to an unimaginably complex problem.
Among all these divine artifacts, the mirrored shield is absolutely crucial. It stands as the climactic element of the myth's methodology. It completely transcends its purpose as just defensive military equipment, acting as a profound symbol of an entirely different way of knowing and interacting with the world. By holding up that reflective surface, Perseus successfully replaces deadly direct exposure with safe, indirect observation. He masters the gaze that had doomed countless warriors before him.
Embedded right in the heart of this myth is a profound realization of the ancient world. Some truths are simply too dangerous to approach directly, but they can be handled indirectly. Survival in the Gorgon's lair strictly depended on looking at a reflection. It required analyzing the terrifying situation with deliberate distance and striking based on an image rather than staring straight at the source of destruction.
You see, Greek mythology rarely portrayed humans as these entirely self-sufficient, unstoppable machines. Instead, it fully recognized fundamental mortal vulnerabilities. The narrative suggests that true wisdom begins precisely when brute force fails. It requires individuals to act intelligently and strategically within their established mortal boundaries, seeking higher guidance when they're faced with forces that far exceed human limitations.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Following the fatal strike, the physical defeat of Medusa did not extinguish her remarkable power. The mythological story seamlessly shifts toward the redistribution of that immense force. Her blood, her head, and her terrifying gaze didn't just vanish into nothingness upon her death. Rather, they persisted, waiting to be claimed and wielded by the victor.
The aftermath reveals an incredibly complex ancient logic. The very thing that threatens survival can sometimes become part of the thing that protects it. Perseus takes the severed head, a source of ultimate, paralyzing terror, and fundamentally changes its purpose in the world. He contains its horrific force, utilizing it as an impenetrable protective tool and the ultimate weapon against future adversaries.
This entire process represents a literal alchemy of survival for ancient cultures. It was a sophisticated psychological mechanism used to process immense danger. In this mythic tradition, mortal danger is successfully contained and carried forward. Paralyzing fear is meticulously transformed into vital caution. Profound pain is distilled into enduring wisdom, and potential loss is dramatically reshaped into a triumphant, powerful identity.
So, as we've seen throughout this explainer, the myth of Perseus and Medusa operates not just as a random assortment of magical events, but as a highly coherent system of survival. It stands as a complete structural model illustrating exactly how human beings in antiquity conceptualized navigating, facing, and ultimately surviving forces that were powerful enough to entirely consume them. It really proves the deep sophistication of ancient storytelling.
And that brings us to the myth's enduring legacy, resting on a timeless, powerful question. How do human beings survive what they cannot safely face directly? For the ancient Greeks, the answer lay in intelligence, mediation, and the profound transformation of terror into strength. It solidifies mythology as an incredibly sophisticated method of examining the deepest and most enduring challenges of the human experience.